Today's morning coffee vinyl side. The Clark Sisters, The Beauty Shop Beat, 1959. The Clark Sisters on this album are not to be confused with the contemporary Christian gospel group of the same name. They were singing many years before that group of sisters was even born. These are the OG Clark Sisters. Picked up in 1944 by trombonist and big band impresario Tommy Dorsey as a vocal group to replace the Pied Pipers after they left in what amounted to a contract dispute, which is a polite way of saying the Pipers were done with Tommy's BS, which included his volatile temper. The sister act was quickly renamed the Sentimentalists, as Dorsey already owned the name, himself being known as the Sentimental Gentleman of Swing. The Clark sisters were young when they were hired by Dorsey, ranging in ages from 17 to 23 years old, and without question, their youth, naivety, and gender led them to being exploited and underappreciated during their tenure with the Dorsey organization. In later years, some of the sisters would talk about surviving those years as a badge of honor, accepting that coming in young and dumb was just what you had to do to make it in the business. But I can only imagine what they probably had to endure or put up with. They all soon married, most likely to get a gentleman protector on their arm, or perhaps to indulge in their own carnal interests. In those days, if you wanted to do the deed, you had to get married for propriety. With the sisters, Tommy hoped he'd have an act that could compete with the Andrews sisters. Close harmony vocal groups were all the rage and part of any big band's arsenal of talent, and the Clark sisters, singing as the Sentimentalists, proved to be very capable. It was becoming obvious that the days of big band supremacy were waning and that vocalists were ascending. It started with Frank Sinatra, another Dorsey alumni, and as more vocalists and vocal groups were charting hits within these big band organizations, there was an economic reckoning on the horizon. The girls would leave Dorsey in 1953, but were unable to continue to be billed as the Sentimentalists because Dorsey had an iron grip on the name. So they reverted back to the Clark sisters and continued to record up until the 1960s. It was said their departure was for economic reasons. They were not getting paid for what they were bringing into the Dorsey org, and that they wanted to pursue a life devoted to home and hearth. But their style of music had an expiry date on it. They might have tried flirting with rock and roll like the Chordettes, but if this album from 1959 is any indication, their vocal style, as good as it was too rooted in the past for them to have much of a future. One of the things that puzzles me, though, and I'm hesitant to say it because I don't want to come off as sexist, the women on the cover of this album look to be in their late 50s or even 60s. And if my math is correct, they were between the ages of 32 and 38 here. Now, my wife and I are 54. Okay, my wife's 53, I'm 54. And I'm just kind of shocked at how rough the sisters look in comparison. Maybe the visual cues are different, or maybe a life of touring and late night smoking, drinking, carousing, and pharmaceuticals, assuming they did it all, really does take a toll on the body. I don't know. Even in my rock and roll years, I was always pretty straight edge. I got beat down by other things, but that's a story for another day. I find some irony here, being that the album is called Beauty Shop Beat. I just don't see it. I guess I'm just not representative of the target audience. Now, maybe this was made for the aspiring middle-aged empty nester of the day who found herself with time on her hands and was ready to seek meaning and fulfillment by becoming a Mary Kay representative. And in that light, this could be seen as a provocative image of female emancipation, like a late 50s version of Rosie the Riveter. Equality and empowerment as an independent Mary Kay distributor. Now that actually makes a little sense to me. Not quite Spice Girls, but I get it now. Girl power.